All right, well, let's talk about World War III, which has apparently just begun, according to the Ukrainians. And today, Putin said that the U.S. is forcing this fight until the very last Ukrainian is dead. Is he wrong? Like, I'll just ask you guys, is Putin wrong about that? That this is the United States forcing this fight? Is any nutcase out there who believes that the United States is not involved in this or is not complicit in this at all? They are literally forcing this. We're going to get into Antony Blinken in a second. Ukraine has run out of men and now is turning to women to fight this war. More on that part of the story in a minute as well. But first, Ukraine says World War III has already begun. And again, we've been saying it for a year now. So welcome to the party, pal. Yes, we are already in World War III. Just wait until the real fighting starts. So here is the headlines here. The head of Ukraine's National Security Defense Council has claimed World War III is already underway, with the Moscow-Kyiv conflict pulling in countries far beyond the region. Speaking at the Kyiv Security Forum on Tuesday, Alexei Danilov argued that NATO needs Ukraine as a member of the global turbulence is set to continue. We're going to strengthen the alliance, he says. If someone thinks that World War III hasn't started, then it's a huge mistake. It has already begun, and it had been underway in a hybrid period for some time, but now it's about to get much, much worse, according to him.
Hybrid period, what do you think that means?
I mean, I think where we're still acting as if like a proxy, you know, where the United States and NATO can sort of still use Ukraine as a proxy to funnel weapons in, and we use up all of their men. But the sad part is, of course, now, which we're going to get to in a second, all their men are gone. So what's left then is NATO to step in with their own forces, their own people manning these devices, instead of the Ukrainians. So that's coming. I think that's what maybe he's acknowledging, that this hybrid period. Let us know in the chat what you think, what a hybrid period means. I think it's like 1 foot in proxy war and 1 foot in actually being there on the ground. But let us know what you think about that. But Western support for the war is fading quickly. And we see that. We see that in the UK. We see that across Europe. We see that in the United States. And that's why America's errand boy, Antony Blinken, showed up in Ukraine today. Because despite what you voters think about the war, and you absolutely don't want us to be funding this and people dying, it doesn't matter, because the deep state absolutely wants this to continue. So Antony Blinken shows up there, doubles down on support for Zelensky today. And, you know, he's there to basically say, we will be here and support until every Ukrainian has been killed. And then American companies will come in and buy up all the land and all the minerals and turn your country into a garrison state for the United States. That's what Antony Blinken...
Well, that's you reading between the lines, I assume.
Oh, he didn't actually say that.
Okay.
He said something... He didn't say that exactly, but we know that's why he was there. But here's actually what he did say. Watch.
I'm here, first and foremost, to demonstrate our ongoing and determined support for Ukraine as it deals with this aggression. We've seen good progress in the counteroffensive, which is very heartening. We want to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs not only to succeed in the counteroffensive, but has what it needs for the long term to make sure that it has a strong deterrent, a strong defense capacity, so that in the future, aggressions like this don't happen again. And we're also determined to continue to work with our partners as they build and rebuild a strong economy, a strong democracy, all of which is necessary to ensure that Ukraine not only survives, but it thrives in the future. And in that, Ukraine has a strong partner in the United States. And for me, it's always a special pleasure to be with, again, not only my colleague, but my friend, mutual player. We've been...
Yeah. So... And he's like, don't touch me. Anyway, so he says, good progress. I want to underline that point. So
yeah, that point kind of floored me. I had to pick my jaw off the ground because the counteroffensive to keep going well.
Yeah. Good progress in the counteroffensive, he says. So let's just be clear about this. Ukraine sacrificed tens of thousands of men to take an abandoned village from where the Russians had already evacuated civilians. They removed all the civilians, and that's good progress. So now they have an abandoned village, and thousands of Ukrainians died to get it. That's good progress.
And they have not moved the map. at all.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think it's the sum of the whole. He's not just talking about that part of it. He's talking about the part where they have gone in and bought up properties and stuff. It's the sum of the whole. It's been very successful for, U.S. companies and
progress
like war
for
contractors and
BlackRock and Vanguard.
Progress for his customers,
yeah, exactly.
Western global elites.
That makes sense. Yeah.
For them.
So that is good progress, yeah. Or maybe the good progress he's actually talking about this. He stopped by one of many brand new cemeteries in Ukraine. Here's a fresh cemetery. He's like, this is progress. You guys are building things. I see innovation here. You guys are building graves like more closely together, and you've like lined paths with flowers. Like your innovation and progress of building cemeteries, you guys have some of the best technology advancements we've seen in the world. Your cemetery advancement projects are progress.
That is a shocking image. To think about how much responsibility the West has for those graves.
Yeah, he just walks. How do you, you piece of shit, just go in there, lob another $1 billion at this, and then have the audacity to walk down rows of dead soldiers that you are responsible for? You are responsible for this. You are responsible for these people dying for your proxy war. How do you do this and say that the progress is great? And I'm here to see my friends.
And here's another, $1 billion so you can have more cemeteries.
Yeah.
Basically.
Oh, and they're building them. They're building them at a clip that they've never seen before in Ukraine. So, and just to put this in like a finer perspective here, the amount of money that we are spending right now on this conflict, if you're wondering like, well, where's the money going to Maui? Where's the money going, $700 going to families in Maui right now? Ukraine's conflict spending is $100 million per day from the United States. $100 million per day.
I mean, that's up 100% because we know that in 2014 and 2015, the International Monetary Fund was warning Ukraine, stop spending $1 million per day bombing the Donbass. It's not a good use of your money. It's not a good use of our money because we're lending it to you. So if you want to keep borrowing from the IMF, you must stop spending $1 million per day on this war. Well, again, now they're up 100%.
Beam in the chat says Redacted will be Kremlin's new propagandist. No, we're just telling the truth here. We don't support war of any kind. I don't think war is ever a solution. An invasion is never a solution, right? But right now, NATO is making this happen by all accounts. This is NATO's war. This is the whole reason we're here. This is NATO's war.
Well, and to be fair, where my mind goes, we've seen so much propaganda when we saw the fake bodies on the street, as they're driving by, they're showing these bodies. And then as the car's pulling away in the mirror, you see the body get up and start to walk away. We don't even know if these graves are real. This could have been a photo op that they just set up, you know what I mean? Like just to garner support, because look at all these dead soldiers and everything. It's like we don't even know what is going on over there. Like they're giving those people proper burials.
What does that garner? Like when you see...
Well, hold this thought. Hold this thought.
It tells us. Okay.
Mm-hmm. No, I was going to say no, go ahead. Finish your thought there.
Well, I was just going to say it tells us, like people that are over here seeing it over there, like, oh my gosh, look at all those soldiers they're losing. We got to do something. We have to help them. It garners support for people that are on the side of what's going on, what they think is going on over there.
It's an interesting point, and I think put a pin in that for a moment, because as Natalie says, we're going to circle back to that. We're going to circle back because the BBC has just done a big report on the amount of graves in Ukraine. And so we're going to show you that. And so it is interesting that we're starting to see more and more, like we're seeing photo ops in front of grave sites now on the part of the West.
And anyone who wants to call us the Kremlin propaganda, this is not the place for you if you're the kind of person who needs to reduce your thinking to good and bad. So I'm sorry, this is not the place that you have to think that Russia's the bad guy in order to support Ukraine. You can't see the bad things that Ukraine has been doing for the last decade. You can't see that if Russia leaves that place, those civilians there will continue to be attacked at the price of $1 million per day. So I'm not pro-Russia, but I definitely don't want those civilians to continue to be attacked as they have been for the last 10 years. And if that means that saying that's uncomfortable is pro-Russia, just go. Just get out of here. We don't want any reductive thinking here that you can't handle nuance. Bye.
All you have to do is do a search on Google still, and go pre the Russian thing, the pre-2020 or whenever that was, and you can find all kinds of articles on what Ukraine was doing. But those they don't talk about it now, but previously, if you Google it, it's all still there. You can see what Ukraine has been doing for the past 14 years to the Donbass.
Yeah, you have to choose who dies here, right? Russia's holding the line so those civilians stop dying. If they leave, it's back to bombing those civilians, and worse, it will be worse for those people. And so now Russia is throwing those men, or I'm sorry, Ukraine is throwing those men against the line like a fly zapper, and they're dying for no reason. That line can hold. It can be over right now if peace talks were attended, which the West refuses to do.
Now, if that commenter was making the point that Russia might end up using what we're talking about here in a way that maybe ends the war, great. Then great. That would be amazing, but that's not going to happen. NATO doesn't give a rat's ass about these men being killed, so that doesn't matter at all. These grave sites are fantastic for NATO because it's accomplishing exactly what NATO wants, which is every Ukrainian to be killed, basically, and to turn Ukraine into another version of the United States, a garrison state for expansion. That's all they want. Of course, that's it. That's all they want. Meanwhile, the Western media is being banned from the Ukrainian government by the Ukrainian government from covering the war on the front lines. Now, they don't want you to see how bad it actually is. According to Swiss journalists, the blackout on Ukrainian front lines is real. So the Ukrainian General Staff has banned journalists from accessing combat zones. So you can't go. You want to see what's going on there, you're not going to be able to see it. And according to the Swiss newspaper, the news spread like a powder on Sunday, arousing anger and indignation among many journalists present in Ukraine. The front line is now totally forbidden to them, unless, of course, they have written authorization from Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So you literally, it's like, you'd have to get it's almost like their version of Mark Mýlí would have to sign a letter and say, yes, you, the BBC, can go and cover it. So imagine what kind of coverage you will get from the Ukrainian side on the front lines of this war. Zero or highly propagandistic. Totally. I mean, this is exactly what CNN, by the way, admitted. I don't think they admitted. They wanted to admit it about a year and a half ago. They admitted that they are not allowed to go to the front lines. They have to get special permission. And they did this report where they said, well, CNN got special permission to accompany blah, 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 the tank brigade in Ukraine on the front lines to see what these guys are going through. And they did this whole propaganda. So, of course, it was highly choreographed, highly produced, and CNN, they were able to see what they allowed CNN to see. That's it. Highly produced. And now you won't see anything on that side. So, it's very important for the journalists that we feature here on this show who are actually there, being able to get information in the Donbass to show you what's actually happening, because you're not going to see it.
Well, I am looking forward to Zelensky's highly produced, demo reel of after his visit with Antony Blinken. So anytime a famous or powerful person comes and visits him, we've shown you these highly produced sort of episodic, emotional heartstrings pulling. So you can find those pretty easily on Zelensky. So that's the kind of media we'll get, highly produced propaganda.
So mass
Well, I want to point out, too, just really quick, that I think it's a good indication that we don't actually, the United States doesn't actually support Ukraine, because if they were all in with Ukraine and actually supported them, wanted to help them, they would have put them in NATO, and they still haven't done that. And that should be a sign right there that they don't, they don't want to give them money.
No, that tells you everything you need to know, right? We will use you. We are going to use you and your country and your people to antagonize Russia and to try to degrade Russia and get what we want, which is an expanded, proxy, but we're not going to actually add you into NATO. That's all you need to know right there. So massive grave sites can be seen across Ukraine, where estimates now have close to 500,000 dead on the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainian government is getting desperate. They put out a call for men of fighting age to return home to fight in Ukraine. We covered this story yesterday in Poland, where they're leading the charge on this. The Poles are trying to figure out how they can maybe help round up 80,000 that are still there and send them back to be killed in Ukraine. Over 3 million men have fled Ukraine, according to numbers that I'm seeing today, and they do not plan to come back. Like no, we're not going back there. 3.3 million. So why would you go back to die for NATO? Why would you do that? Also, BlackRock can buy out the land from right under your family's feet. Going back to fight for your family farm that's now totally gone and bought up by the likes of these American massive corporations. Ukraine is sending out letters to these men who fled to other parts of Europe now, saying, we know where you are. Here's a letter. We found you. We know exactly where you are. Come back to fight for us or face arrest. Here's a young Ukrainian man today who just received this letter in the mail. And I'll translate. He says, friends, in short time, I don't know what to do.
F word.
In short, I just received this letter in his hand. Here it is. It has my photo on the paper. I translated it, he says. It says that Ukraine has sent a request. According to the Ukrainian authorities, I entered the territory of the European Union illegally. Although I was traveling legally, he says, I entered legally. I didn't buy any certificates here, he says. I told you how I left. And it says here I have to leave the European Union within 2 weeks. I have to leave Europe within 2 weeks. That's it. Otherwise, I'll be forcibly exiled to the territory of Ukraine. I don't even know what to do, he says. Maybe you could tell me in the comments, he says.
I mean,
can you imagine?
I would look up on Yandex Maps how to get to Belarus or Russia. That's what I would do if I was him. Because
are you going to see like an influx of like, yeah, that.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how safe they would be there, but I do know that the temperature is rising to extradite these men into Ukraine because Europe has signaled and continued to signal that this is what it will do, whatever the United States wants, and this is what Ukraine is doing. Now, interestingly enough, you know, Ukraine is, it's just so amazing to remember a year ago how much these European countries were congratulating themselves for opening borders to Ukrainians. I can't believe that now there would be anything official saying you're not supposed to be in Europe. I mean, Zelensky thanked every European leader for accepting our people. The West, the United States, even Mexico made it easy for Ukrainians. So now we're saying, actually, no, you can't be here. I mean, they're almost, you know, we were so upset that like, oh, you know, it doesn't seem fair that they jumped the line in refugee services. But now you're almost better off being a refugee from a different place with darker skin because at least you're not being sent back to fight. This is insanely terrifying.
I saw someone in the chat on YouTube said, just ignore, he was giving advice to this young man. He said, just ignore the letter. They can't arrest you in another country.
They can.
They absolutely can.
Well, that was my question. Like when in that letter, when it says they're going to forcibly remove it, does that mean that the Ukrainian government is able to say, hey, the European officials are going to come grab you and forcibly remove you on their bill? Or are they going to let Ukrainian soldiers into their country to go in and round these people up and take them out?
Well,
no,
I mean,
it'll be it'll be Interpol. I mean, that kid just said in that letter, he said, I translated it. He translated it because it wasn't in Ukrainian. It was in whatever language the country he was in.
It was in the local country in Europe that he was in. So it's Interpol, and it's the local authorities who will come and do it. Look, if it's now illegal for them to not be fighting, if you're of fighting age, and now we know that Ukraine has lowered the bar to, I mean, people with mental illness, people with tuberculosis, HIV, it doesn't matter. I mean, they're going to take any man they can that can walk, and probably some that can't even walk. And so if you're out of the country, it's illegal for you right now, and they're going to be sending out letters on behalf of Zelensky. You better come back and fight and die for NATO. That's exactly what's going to happen here. So if you're a Ukrainian and you're watching this right now, this is the letter you're likely to receive. I mean, and I don't know where you go to seek like refuge right now. I mean, maybe Russia's the only place. I don't know if it'd be interesting to see what the United States does. Hey, we'll send you $1 billion. We'll do everything to support you. What about all the fighting age Ukrainians that are living in the United States right now? Mm-hmm. I mean, the tens of thousands of them that have now taken refuge there. Is the United States going to round them up and send them? You know, the United States open border policy? I mean, what's going to happen?
We know they were fast-tracked.
Yeah, they were given fast track. They skipped over people. They skipped over people at immigration. I mean, so Ukraine has run out of men. Now they are turning to women. The same women who Zelensky yelled at a few weeks ago in that video where he, saying, hey, you guys are partying in nightclubs and so forth. You're out partying in the middle of like downtown Kiev, like nightclubs, and these men and these mostly women. But, we need you now to fight. So these young women who are up partying, we need you to fight.
They look fierce.
They look really fierce on the battlefield. They're going to be it's going to be a whole nother world when they're out now being forced to fight. So now Ukraine has released a brand new recruitment video today targeting women specifically. Watch.
Я просто жінка. Грішна і свята, слабка і сильна, сіра і яскрава. Я просто жінка. Просто жінка.
Feels like a trap, doesn't it? Like we promised them refugee, we promised them they'd be safe here, and then now we know where they are, and we're going to send them right back.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's a
subterfuge. It's an absolute.
Well, think about the training. Like they just going to tell these women, hey, just see the little tip of this gun. You just point it towards somebody, and then pull this little trigger. That's all you need to know. Like, think of how long it takes to train somebody to fight in a war.
No, I mean, it's unbelievable how much training it takes and in 6 weeks, like you think that's going to be enough? The 6 weeks.
And they're just going to be infantry, like no tanks, that's all they're going to be, just meat?
Yeah, they will be meat going on these landmine fields, specifically to root out where these landmines are. Walk out there, and I heard reports about this today, that's how they're using a lot of these men. We need you to go out in these fields and clear these landmines. And that's how many of them are being killed. The BBC just published a great piece of journalism, imagine that, and the number of war dead in Ukraine, about the number of war dead in Ukraine, it's staggering. Something the government surely is not happy about in the United Kingdom. But the BBC did this story anyway, and I just want to show you just a piece of this BBC documentary that they just released a few days ago about Ukraine's war dead. So that's why I asked you guys earlier to put a pin in this about the graves. These are all fresh graves. A lot of them are fresh graves, and they have multiple interviews with a lot of different family members who were there at the graves crying about like their son, their brother, their husband, who's dead now. And they're there, right at their grave. So, I don't think that these are fake personally. But I don't think that these are fake graves. And I think there's plenty of other intelligence to support the fact that these are not fake graves. But I get your cynicism, given the fact that we've seen other things faked in this. But here you go. This is the BBC. And watch this. It's pretty amazing.
At cemeteries all across Ukraine, the military dead just keep coming. Here in Lviv, near the border with Poland, but very far from the fighting on the Eastern Front, the fresh graves of soldiers number in their hundreds. There are so many, in fact, at this cemetery that up the hill here, they're clearing the way of the fallen from previous wars to make room for those lost in this conflict.
So they're moving bodies in old graves that I guess no one's around anymore. They've been there for 100 years. So we're going to move those bodies out of the way to make room for new bodies because we just don't have the space for it. So the amount of graves being built is amazing. Since this BBC report was prepared 9 days ago, as our friend of the show, Larry Johnson, wrote on his website, he said, quote, at least 7,000 more Ukrainian soldiers have died in combat. 9 days ago. That equals the number of killed in action American soldiers in all of Iraq and Afghanistan during the 16 years of fighting. 16 years. And in 9 days, the equivalency. Just put in perspective, he says, about the savagery of the combat that's currently underway in Ukraine. And we always want to remind you, this is the map. This is the live view map. Today's battles, today's fighting, today's explosions. This is as of about an hour ago. Explosions all throughout the Donbass in what was formerly eastern Ukraine. These people there voted overwhelmingly, I think over like 95% in votes to become part of Russia because they've been sick and tired of the genocide that's been unfolding there for the past, since 2014, after the failure of the Minsk agreements. And elections are coming up. Elections are about to happen once again. And so we will see what that looks like in this area. Remember, Ukraine tells us they can't have elections, but they're going to hold elections here, which has been under constant genocide for years. So, but this is the area that's that is contested, and Zelensky doubling down, basically saying we need to return to pre-war Ukraine, or this doesn't end. That means Crimea. That means all of the Donbass.
And that western border you're seeing there, where the red turns to white, is what Antony Blinken says is the counteroffensive that's going well.
Good progress.
It has not changed since we started looking at this map at the beginning of the counteroffensive in the spring. It has been the same. So all those lives lost, no land gained, all those untrained lives lost. So now we're talking about if Russia leaves, those civilians inside who live inside that red area will again become attacked and terrorized by the Ukrainian army, or what's left of it. And so, it's a matter of protecting those civilians, but it's essentially civilians being thrown at the line. So it's civilians for civilians at this point, because those are untrained military men. We've shown you that footage as well. So it's an unbelievable tragedy. We absolutely should demand of our leaders that peace talks be agreed to right now, yesterday. And tell your local officials that you do not support sending your money to send these people to their deaths.
Yeah, I would love it if Ukrainians would actually watch and pay attention to what's actually happening, knowing that they're being used by NATO, exactly what's happening here to the last Ukrainian.